For 3 months, there has been one face at the center of this investigation, one masked figure, one set of movements caught on a doorbell camera in the early hours of February 1st. Law enforcement built around it. The media reported around it. A reward of over $1.2 million was structured to bring that person forward. And the public, millions of people who have followed this case since the very beginning, have been staring at that same face, searching for something in it that would explain what happened to Nancy Guthrie, analyzing every frame, every movement, every detail visible in that footage. For 3 months, that image has been the entire investigation as far as the public could see. But on May 6th, the woman who built the science of criminal profiling looked at that footage and said something that 3 months of public coverage had never been willing to say out loud. That man, the only visible suspect in this entire case, may already be dead, and the person who killed him is still out there, looking ordinary, moving freely, watching this investigation from the inside, going about their life as though none of this is connected to them at all. Welcome to Cirrus, where we reconstruct the last known hours before everything changed. If you have been with this channel from the beginning, what you are about to hear is the sharpest turn this case has taken yet. If you are new here, subscribe before this video ends, because this case is moving fast and you do not want to be the last one to understand where it is going. Here is what everyone assumed for 3 months. Find the man on the porch. Find the answer. It was a reasonable assumption. He was the only visible actor in a crime that left almost no other traces. His backpack, his gloves, his mask. His measured, deliberate movements across Nancy Guthrie's property at 2:28 in the morning. Everything about the visible evidence pointed inward toward him. He was the target of the investigation. He was the face on the wanted posters. He was the reason $1 million reward existed. Every tip line, every press conference, every public appeal was built around one objective: identify that figure, and the case closes. But the profilers who gathered to analyze this case did not see a mastermind when they studied that footage. They saw something else entirely. They saw a person who was placed there by someone who never planned to be seen at all. Someone who understood that the most effective way to stay invisible is to give the investigation something else to look at. And the more these profilers examined the footage, the clearer it became. The man on that porch was never the center of this story. He was the outer edge of it, the part that was always meant to be found, a deliberate distraction, while the part that actually mattered stayed completely invisible behind it. Dr. Ann Burgess, the researcher whose work on violent criminal behavior formed the very foundation of how the FBI profiles offenders today, was asked directly whether the masked intruder acted alone. Her answer was immediate: no. And then she went further. She said that person, the one the entire world has been searching for, may have been eliminated. Brian Enton pressed her. He asked whether she meant the porch guy could be dead. She confirmed it. He asked if that meant killed by whoever sent him. The boss. She confirmed that too, on record. No hesitation. Think about what that statement actually means. The only face this investigation has had for 90 days. Gone. Not hiding. Not running. Not lying low in another state. Possibly removed by the same person who put him at that door in the first place. Because when you send someone to do something this serious and then the entire world starts looking for them, they stop being an asset. They become the only living connection between the person who planned everything and a federal indictment. They become a liability. And liabilities in operations like this get managed the same way the original problem was managed, not out of panic, out of the same cold, deliberate calculation that designed the plan from the beginning. That is not a dramatic theory constructed for television. That is the documented behavioral pattern of organized hierarchical criminal operations. When the outer layer gets exposed, the center cuts it loose. Every time. The same calculation that designed the original plan is the same calculation that ends the person who carried it out. Dr. Gary Brucato described the structure of this crime as a spiderweb. And that image matters because a spiderweb has a very specific architecture that most people do not think about carefully enough. The outer threads are the most visible. They are also the most exposed. They catch things. They hold things temporarily. But they are not where the spider lives. The spider lives at the center. still patient, connected to every single thread, aware of every vibration across the entire structure, but never directly visible from the outside. Never the first thing you see when you approach the web. The man at Nancy Guthrie's door was an outer thread, visible, exposed, and if Burgess is right, already removed. But the center of that web is still intact, still connected, still controlling everything from a position that nobody has photographed, nobody has named, and nobody has publicly identified. Bruchato called that person a wolf in sheep's clothing, and that phrase is not dramatic language chosen for effect. It is a precise behavioral description with a very specific meaning. A wolf in sheep's clothing does not look dangerous. That is the entire point. They look like someone you would trust, someone you would let into your home, someone whose name, if you heard it attached to this crime, would make you stop and say, "That cannot be right. I know that person. That person is completely normal," because that is exactly what they built. That is the armor they constructed and have worn every single day. And it is precisely that armor that has kept them invisible for 3 months while the entire world focused on the wrong face. Now, here is the question that Dr. Casey Jordan answered. And it is the most uncomfortable one this entire case has produced. How did the boss get close enough to plan this? Because planning a crime like this requires knowledge, not general knowledge. Not the kind of information anyone could pull from a public source. Specific, detailed operational knowledge. The layout of Nancy's home, her daily routine, her schedule. The fact that she lived alone. The fact that her property had specific accessible entry points. The fact that she had predictable patterns that could be studied, mapped, and ultimately used against her. That kind of knowledge does not come from a search engine. It does not come from driving past a house once. It comes from proximity, from time spent in or around that specific environment, from repeated moments of access that felt completely unremarkable to everyone involved, including Nancy herself. Jordan pointed to the specific category of person who would have that access without triggering any alarm whatsoever. An Uber driver, a delivery driver, a maintenance worker, a service professional, a contractor, someone who passed through Nancy Guthrie's world in a way that nobody thought twice about, because people like that pass through everyone's world constantly. They are invisible by design, not because they are hiding, but because the role they occupy makes them part of the background, part of the scenery that the eye moves across without stopping. Nancy Guthrie has lived in that Tucson home since the 1970s. Decades of people with perfectly legitimate reasons to be on that property. Decades of faces that came and went without leaving any significant impression on anyone. Repairmen, delivery drivers, utility workers, neighbors, acquaintances. And somewhere in that decades-long accumulation of ordinary, unremarkable interactions, one of them was not ordinary at all. One of them was watching with a specific and deliberate kind of attention, building a specific kind of understanding about the rhythms of that house, waiting patiently for a specific kind of moment that they had already decided was coming. Jordan added one more detail that makes all of this even harder to fully process. The boss may have first become aware of Nancy through Savannah, through television, through the public visibility of a daughter who sits in front of millions of people every single morning. Someone who watched the Today Show regularly and saw not just a journalist doing her job, but a connection, a thread that led somewhere private, a door that, with enough patience and enough planning, could eventually be opened. Here is where this case turns in a direction that most public coverage has not fully explored. Because if the boss is the kind of person Jordan described, someone concealed inside the fabric of ordinary daily life, then the behavioral evidence of everything they did after January 31st is already present in the world around them, already visible to the people in their immediate environment. Those people are just not yet aware of what they are actually looking at. They are seeing the behavior without understanding what is generating it. This is the specific detail Clemente raised in his assessment of post-offense behavior. He said that because this person was not a trained professional criminal, they would have exhibited both pre- and post-offense behavioral changes that the people around them would have noticed. Shifts in daily routine, subtle changes in how they carry themselves, reactions that do not quite match the moment when this case comes up in conversation, an emotional distance that was not present before, a tension that lives just underneath the surface of their otherwise normal-looking life. Small things individually, but together, a pattern that points somewhere specific. And here is the layer that almost nobody in public coverage has addressed directly. If Porch Guy is gone, if he was in fact eliminated, then the people closest to the boss went through something that left its own set of marks. Because removing someone is not a clean, invisible act that leaves no trace. It changes the person who made that decision in ways that are very difficult to fully conceal. It changes how they interact with the people around them. It creates a particular kind of psychological weight that does not simply disappear after a few weeks. It transfers into behavior, into reactions, into the kind of quiet but unmistakable shift that happens in a person who has crossed a line they fully understand they can never uncross. And that shift shows up in exactly the behavioral patterns that experienced investigators are specifically trained to identify. Now, here is the part that explains why this case stalled for as long as it did. And more importantly, why everything that happens from this point forward is fundamentally different. Brian Enton confirmed on the record that in the critical early weeks of this investigation, the Pima County Sheriff's Department was not fully sharing evidence with the FBI. Information that should have been in federal hands within days was not. Leadership changes within the sheriff's office placed less experienced personnel in charge during the most important window the entire investigation had. A forensics professor who reviewed the handling of this case said publicly that it will be studied in classrooms for years, specifically as an example of what investigators must never do. Every procedural failure, every communication gap, every day that critical evidence sat outside federal hands, all of it documented, all of it now part of the permanent record of how this case was initially mishandled. That institutional failure bought the boss time. Significant time. Every single day that evidence sat in a private lab instead of an FBI facility was a day the threads were not being pulled, a day the profile was not being refined, a day the behavioral trail was getting colder. And the boss, whether they understood this consciously or simply moved through that window on instinct, operated during those weeks with a level of confidence that the current situation no longer supports, because that window closed, and it is not opening again. The DNA collected at Nancy Guthrie's home, including a hair sample recovered from the scene, has been transferred to the FBI laboratory, Advanced Forensic Technology, Federal Resources. The full analytical weight of an agency that does not have budget constraints, does not have jurisdiction limitations, and operates with tools and capabilities that did not exist in the same form even 5 years ago. The coordination between the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI has been fully resolved. The evidence is exactly where it needs to be. And there is nothing the boss can do about what is already inside that laboratory. Nothing. That material does not disappear. It does not get lost. It does not get mishandled by an understaffed local office. It sits in federal hands and gets worked until it produces an answer. If anything in this video connects to something you have personally seen or heard, someone whose behavior shifted noticeably after January 31st, someone who reacted too strongly or strangely when this case came up in conversation, someone whose ordinary life developed a quiet and unexplained tension that was not there before. The FBI needs to hear from you. Submit a tip directly at tips.fbi.gov or contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department. The reward in this case stands at over $1.2 million. It remains completely unclaimed. That money exists for exactly this kind of moment, when one person finally connects one detail to another and understands what they have been sitting on without realizing it. Here is the thing about wolves in sheep's clothing that most people fundamentally miss. They are not patient because they are calm. They are not patient because this is easy for them. They are patient because they have something enormous to protect, and they know it. Every single day that passes without an arrest is not a victory for them. It is another day they are required to sustain the performance, the unremarkable routine, the ordinary face, the life that is supposed to look like it has nothing to hide. And that kind of sustained performance is exhausting in a way that compounds over time, especially when the audience keeps growing larger, when the coverage keeps intensifying. When the case that was supposed to fade quietly keeps finding new voices, new profilers, new forensic developments, new analytical frameworks that systematically close the distance between the outer ring of that web and the person sitting at its center. The DNA is at the FBI. The behavioral profile is fully constructed. The framework that Burgess, Bricado, and Jordan built on May 6th gave investigators something they did not have at any point in the previous 3 months. Not just a working theory about who is responsible, but a detailed operational map of how that person thinks, how they move through the world, what they are working hardest to protect, and where, under the right kind of pressure, they are most likely to make the mistake that unravels everything. Dr. Ann Burgess built the science that helped identify and convict some of the most dangerous individuals in American criminal history. When she examines a case and states clearly that the answer lies in a specific direction, that is not speculation offered for a television audience. That is the conclusion of a career built entirely on understanding how people exactly like this behave when they begin to feel the walls moving closer. 3 months ago, Nancy Guthrie left a family dinner and did not come home. For 3 months, the world focused on one face captured on one camera and believed that identifying that face would close this case. But the answer was never in that footage. It was always behind it, in someone who planned everything from a safe distance, who executed through someone else entirely, who, when the exposure risk became too significant, made the kind of decision that only a person with something catastrophic to lose would be capable of making. They eliminated the one person who could directly connect them to what happened, and in doing so, they may have genuinely believed they had severed the final thread between themselves and the events of February 1st. But the hair was already collected before that calculation was made. The DNA was already in the process of being analyzed. The footage had already been studied by people who understood what they were looking at. The profilers had already traced the shape of the web far enough to understand where its center had to be. And the threads, every single one of them, lead back to the same point. Dr. Gary Bricado called them a wolf in sheep's clothing. Dr. Ann Burgess called them the boss. And somewhere right now, that person is monitoring this case exactly the way they have monitored it for 3 months. From the inside, behind the face that is supposed to look like it belongs to someone with nothing to hide, hoping that the threads stop moving before they complete the path back to the center. The FBI is making no such promises. This is Cirrus, reconstructing the last known hours before everything changed. If this video shifted how you understand this case, subscribe and hit the bell. The moment something breaks in this investigation, you will hear it here first. Every update we publish is built the same way. Named sources, documented evidence, nothing included that cannot be verified and backed. We are not going anywhere, and neither is this case.